The Zenthari Galactic Museum floated in the cold darkness of space like a giant crystal flower. Its transparent walls curved and twisted in impossible ways that hurt human eyes to look at for too long. Inside the massive structure, millions of artifacts from dead civilizations filled countless halls and chambers. Some items glowed with their own light, while others seemed to drink in the brightness around them. Dr. Vexatal moved through the main exhibition hall with the grace of someone who had walked these paths for over 200 years. Her forearms carried different devices while her large black eyes scanned the endless displays with practiced ease. The museum was her life's work and her greatest pride. Every piece in the collection told a story of species that had risen to greatness before falling into silence. The Cathari with their quantum mathematics, the Velterans who could shape energy with their minds, the Scion Collective whose thoughts could cross galaxies in seconds. All of them had contributed something to the museum before their civilizations grew old and faded away. But one artifact stood apart from all the others. In the center of the most important wing sat the crown jewel of impossibilities. Dr. Vextal stopped before it as she did every day and felt the same mixture of wonder and frustration that had haunted her for decades. The void resonator looked deceptively simple. It was a smooth black oval about the size of a human head, with patterns carved into its surface that seemed to shift and dance when viewed from different angles. The patterns never actually moved, but somehow, they always looked different each time someone looked at them. The Zenthari had found the device 300 years ago, floating in the wreckage of an ancient space station. The station had belonged to the architects, a civilization so old that even their ruins were legends. According to the few records that survived, the architects claimed the void resonator could change the basic laws of reality itself. They said it could bend space and time, create matter from nothing, and bridge the gaps between dimensions. The record spoke of it as the key to ultimate understanding of the universe. For 3 centuries, the greatest minds in the galaxy had tried to activate the device. The Cathari quantum physicists had bombarded it with every type of radiation known to science. The Velteran energy masters had channeled their most powerful forces into its core. The Scion Collective had focused their combined mental abilities on its patterns for months at a time. Brilliant engineers had tried to take it apart to understand its inner workings, but their tools simply slid off its surface without leaving a mark. Mystics and scholars had meditated over ancient texts searching for clues about how the architects had used it. Nothing worked. The void resonator remained as cold and lifeless as a piece of ordinary stone. It had become a symbol of the limits of galactic knowledge. Proof that some mysteries were simply beyond the reach of even the most advanced civilizations. Dr. Vextal had spent 40 years of her life studying the device personally. She had written 17 research papers about its construction and published 3 books about the architect's civilization. She knew every curve of its surface and every variation in its patterns. She could recite from memory every failed experiment that had been attempted on it. Today was different, though. Today marked the first visit by a human delegation as part of the new cultural exchange program. The humans were the newest species to join the Galactic Council. Barely 50 years out of their own solar system, they were primitive by galactic standards, with no advanced technology and no special abilities. Their brains worked slowly compared to most species, and they lived such short lives that they barely had time to learn anything useful. Most council members considered them curious pets, rather than serious partners in galactic civilization. Captain Jake Morrison led the small group of human visitors through the museum's entrance. He was a typical human male with brown hair and easy smile that showed too many teeth. His casual manner and relaxed posture looked strange next to the formal bearing of the alien diplomats who accompanied him. Dr. Lisa Parker walked beside him, her attention already focused on the displays they passed. She was the expedition's chief xenoarchaeologist, whatever that meant in human terms. Her credentials seemed impressive for such a young species, but Dr. Vextal doubted she would understand even the simplest artifacts in the collection. The tour began in the Hall of Extinct. Wonders where Dr. Vextal explained the history of each major civilization. She spoke slowly and used simple concepts since the human translation devices were still quite primitive. Captain Morrison asked polite questions about the various displays while his companions took notes and recordings. They seemed genuinely interested in learning about galactic history, which was refreshing compared to some species who only cared about acquiring new technology. As they moved through the museum, Dr. Vextal noticed that Dr. Parker spent longer at each display than the others. She studied the information plaques carefully and often asked follow-up questions about construction techniques or cultural context. Her questions showed a surprising depth of understanding for such a primitive species. When they reached the Hall of Mathematical Artifacts, she became particularly animated while discussing probability theories with one of the Cathari researchers. The tour continued through various wings, showcasing weapons that could destroy stars, art that changed based on the viewer's emotions, and machines whose purpose remained completely unknown. Each section represented thousands of years of accumulated knowledge from across the galaxy. The humans seemed impressed but not overwhelmed, which surprised Dr. Vextal. Most new species became lost in the sheer scope of galactic civilization when they first saw the museum's collection. Finally, they reached the crown jewel wing where the void resonator waited in its place of honor. Dr. Vextal began her standard presentation about the device and its long history of defeating every attempt to unlock its secrets. She explained the various theories about its construction and the failed experiments that had been tried over the centuries. The humans listened politely as she described the latest research efforts and the ongoing debates about architect technology. Dr. Parker moved closer to the display case as Dr. Vextal spoke. Her expression changed from polite interest to intense concentration as she studied the artifact's surface patterns. She tilted her head at different angles and stepped slowly around the display to view it from multiple directions. Something about her behavior seemed different from the usual tourist reactions. There was a quality to her attention that reminded Dr. Vextal of the serious researchers who had dedicated their lives to understanding the device. The presentation concluded with Dr. Vextal's traditional statement that the void resonator remained one of the galaxy's greatest unsolved mysteries. The other humans began to move toward the next section of the tour, but Dr. Parker stayed behind, still staring at the patterns on the artifact's surface with growing fascination. Dr. Lisa Parker could not shake the feeling that she had seen these patterns before. The other humans had moved on to examine a collection of crystalline sculptures that sang when touched, but she remained fixed in place before the void resonator. The artifact's surface showed intricate designs that seemed to follow some kind of mathematical sequence, though she could not quite identify which one. The curves reminded her of the golden ratio spiral she had studied in college, but they were far more complex and seemed to branch off in directions that made her eyes water if she followed them too long. Dr. Vextal noticed her intense focus and glided back to where Lisa stood. The Zenthari curator's forearms moved in what Lisa had learned was a gesture of curiosity among her species. "You humans have such interesting facial expressions," Dr. Vextal said through her translation device. "Your features suggest deep thought but also confusion. What do you see in the patterns that captures your attention so completely?" Lisa pointed at a section of the artifact where several curved lines intersected in a way that looked almost familiar. "These designs remind me of something from our own mathematical history. We have sequences called Fibonacci numbers that create spirals similar to these, but yours are much more sophisticated. They seem to branch and split in ways that our simple sequences never do." The translation device struggled with the unfamiliar term. Dr. Vextal's large black eyes blinked slowly as she processed the foreign concept. "Fibonacci is unknown to our databases. This is some form of human mathematics." Lisa nodded and began to explain how the simple sequence worked, where each number was the sum of the two before it. She traced the basic spiral pattern in the air with her finger, showing how it appeared in nature from seashells to flower petals. Dr. Vextal listened with growing interest as Lisa described how humans had found this pattern everywhere in their world, from the arrangement of seeds in sunflowers to the structure of galaxies. "But these patterns on your artifact are like Fibonacci spirals that learn to dance," Lisa continued, studying the surface more closely. "They start simple but become incredibly complex as they develop. It's almost like they're showing the evolution of mathematical understanding itself." Without really thinking about what she was doing, Lisa reached toward the display case. Her mind was completely focused on trying to understand the relationship between the patterns, and she forgot about the protective barrier that surrounded all the museum's most precious artifacts. Her fingers passed through what should have been solid energy shielding, as if it were made of air. Dr. Vextal started to call out a warning, but the words died in her throat as Lisa's hand made contact with the void resonator's smooth surface. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The artifact remained as cold and lifeless as it had been for 3 centuries. Then everything changed. The patterns on the device's surface blazed to life with brilliant white light that pulsed in perfect rhythm with Lisa's heartbeat. Energy raced along the carved lines like liquid fire, creating a web of illumination that hurt to look at directly. The light grew brighter and brighter until it filled the entire exhibition hall with blazing radiance that made the other artifacts look dim by comparison. The void resonator began to hum with a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The tone was low and musical, like a giant tuning fork vibrating through the bones of everyone present. As the humming grew louder, reality itself began to bend around the artifact. Gravity fluctuated wildly in the immediate area, causing smaller objects to float upward before crashing back down to the floor. The air shimmered like heat waves rising from summer pavement. Museum alarms began shrieking throughout the facility, as sensors detected massive energy readings unlike anything in their databases. Emergency barriers slammed down around the crown jewel wing, trapping Lisa, Dr. Vextal, and several other visitors inside with the now active artifact. Red warning lights bathed everything in an eerie glow while automated voices announced containment, protocols in a dozen different languages. Captain Morrison and the rest of the human delegation came running back toward the commotion, their casual tour suddenly forgotten. Morrison's military training kicked in as he assessed the situation and began shouting orders to his team. The alien diplomats who had been accompanying them stood frozen in shock, their various species' reactions ranging from fear to wonder to scientific excitement. Dr. Vextal remained motionless near the display, all 4 of her arms trembling as she stared at the impossible sight before her. In over 200 years of life, she had never seen anything that challenged her understanding of the universe so completely. 3 centuries of failure had been overturned in a single moment by a primitive human who had simply reached out and touched the artifact. Lisa herself seemed unaware of the chaos erupting around her. She stood with her hand still pressed against the void resonator's surface, her eyes wide with wonder as energy continued to flow between her and the ancient device. The patterns under her palm pulsed and shifted, creating new configurations that had never been seen before. Her face showed a mixture of amazement and growing understanding, as if the artifact was somehow communicating directly with her mind. The humming sound grew deeper and more complex, adding harmonies that seemed to resonate with the fundamental frequencies of matter itself. Small objects throughout the wing began to vibrate in sympathy with the tone. The very walls of the museum flexed and bent as space-time rippled outward from the artifact in waves that made everyone's vision blur. Captain Morrison reached the emergency barrier and began pounding on its surface, shouting for Lisa to step away from the device. His voice was lost in the growing symphony of sound that filled the air. Dr. Vextal finally broke from her trance and activated her emergency communicator, sending urgent messages to the museum's research staff and the Galactic Council's scientific division. The energy discharge reached a crescendo that lit up the entire museum like a miniature star. Every sensor in the facility overloaded as readings spiked beyond their maximum capacity. The void resonator's surface became too bright to look at directly, forcing everyone to shield their eyes from its radiance. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded to a soft, steady glow. The humming settled into a gentle background tone that was almost pleasant to hear. The gravitational fluctuations stabilized and normal physics reasserted itself throughout the wing. Lisa slowly removed her hand from the artifact's surface, stumbling backward as the connection was broken. The void resonator continued to glow with soft internal light, its patterns still moving in slow, graceful dances across its surface. After 300 years of silence, the most mysterious artifact in galactic history had finally awakened, and it had taken a human touch to bring it to life. News of the awakening spread across the galaxy, faster than light itself through the quantum communication networks that connected every major civilization. Within hours of the incident at the museum, emergency sessions were being called on a dozen different worlds. The Galactic Council's most important members gathered in virtual meetings while their physical forms remained light years apart. Holographic projections filled the massive conference chamber aboard the Council flagship, creating a shimmering assembly of the galaxy's greatest minds. High Counselor Thexmar of the Zenthari Collective spoke first, his ancient voice carrying the weight of centuries of accumulated wisdom. His image flickered slightly as the quantum transmission struggled to maintain perfect clarity across such vast distances. Esteemed colleagues, we face a situation that challenges everything we thought we knew about the universe. For 300 standard years, our finest scientists have studied the void resonator. Every known form of energy has been applied to its surface. Every theoretical framework has been tested against its construction. Yet a human, a member of a species barely past their home star system, succeeded where we have all failed. Dr. Kirlani, the Cathari quantum specialist who had devoted 40 years of her life to studying the artifact, appeared visibly shaken by the news. Her crystalline form pulsed with colors that indicated deep confusion and frustration. The implications are staggering. Either our understanding of quantum mechanics is fundamentally flawed, or these humans possess capabilities that our sensors cannot detect. I demand immediate biological analysis of Dr. Parker. We must understand what makes her different from every other being who has attempted to activate the device. Captain. Morrison stood in the center of the council chamber, suddenly finding himself representing his entire species before the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The formal atmosphere and the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on him, but he maintained his composure as he had been trained to do in difficult diplomatic situations. With all due respect to the council, Dr. Parker is not a laboratory specimen to be dissected for your curiosity. She is a brilliant scientist who deserves to be treated as a colleague, not as a test subject for your experiments. The debate that followed lasted for hours as different species proposed increasingly wild theories about what had happened. The Veltran energy masters insisted that humans must have some form of bioelectric field that resonated with the artifact's internal mechanisms. The Scion Collective claimed that Dr. Parker had unconsciously used psychic abilities that she was not even aware of possessing. Some delegates suggested that humanity was secretly an advanced civilization that was hiding their true technological capabilities from the rest of the galaxy. Others proposed even more fantastic explanations. Perhaps Earth had been visited by the ancient architects millions of years ago, and they had somehow altered human genetics to serve as living keys for their technology. Maybe humans were actually descendants of the architects themselves, carrying dormant abilities in their DNA that could only be triggered by contact with the proper devices. The theories grew more elaborate and desperate as each species tried to find an explanation that fit within their understanding of how the universe worked. Meanwhile, back at the museum, Dr. Parker found herself surrounded by teams of researchers from a dozen different species, all eager to study her and understand what had made the activation possible. Medical scanners analyzed every aspect of her biology, while computer systems compared her genetic structure to vast databases of known life forms. Brain monitoring devices tracked her neural patterns as she attempted to explain what she had experienced during those crucial moments of contact with the artifact. The results were frustratingly normal. Every test showed that Lisa Parker was a completely ordinary human being, with no unusual capabilities or hidden technologies. Her DNA contained the standard human genetic markers with no alien influences. Her brain scans revealed typical human neural activity with no signs of psychic abilities or enhanced cognitive functions. By every scientific measure available to galactic civilization, she was exactly what she appeared to be. I think we are approaching this problem from the wrong direction, Lisa finally said during one of the endless research sessions. She had grown tired of being poked and prodded by alien medical devices, and her patience with the increasingly frantic theories was wearing thin. Everyone keeps asking what makes humans special or different in some superior way. But maybe that is not the right question to be asking. Maybe we should be wondering what makes us different in a completely ordinary way. Dr. Vextal, who had become Lisa's closest ally among the alien researchers, encouraged her to continue with this line of thinking. The Zenthari curator had spent more time observing human behavior than most of her colleagues, and she had begun to notice patterns that others missed. Explain what you mean by ordinary differences. How can a difference be both significant and ordinary at the same time? Lisa stood and began pacing around the research chamber as her thoughts took shape. Every species here evolved to be excellent at specific things. You Zenthari can process multiple complex calculations simultaneously with your four-armed coordination. The Cathari understand quantum mechanics intuitively because your brains developed in quantum-rich environments. The Velterans can sense energy patterns directly through specialized organs. Each of you became incredibly sophisticated specialists. She gestured toward the still glowing void resonator, visible through the chamber's transparent walls. But humans evolved differently. We became generalists instead of specialists. Our brains developed to recognize patterns across many different domains at the same time, rather than becoming perfect at any single type of thinking. We are not smarter than any of you in your areas of expertise. In fact, we are probably much less capable than you are in those specific fields, but we might be uniquely able to see connections between different types of patterns that specialists would analyze separately. The assembled researchers considered this possibility with growing interest. It was a radically different approach to understanding intelligence and capability. Instead of looking for what made humans superior, Lisa was suggesting that their apparent limitations might actually be their greatest strength. The idea that generalization rather than specialization could be the key to unlocking ancient technology challenged fundamental assumptions about how advanced civilizations should develop. Dr. Kerlani's crystalline form shifted to colors indicating deep thought and reluctant acceptance. You proposed that the architects designed their technology to require broad pattern recognition rather than specialized knowledge. This would explain why our focused approaches have failed, but it raises disturbing questions about our own evolutionary development. Have we become too specialized to understand truly universal principles? Dr. Parker's insight about human pattern recognition led to the most intensive research project in galactic history. Teams of scientists from every major civilization worked together to map the fundamental differences between human thinking and the specialized cognitive processes of other species. What they discovered over the following weeks revolutionized their understanding of intelligence itself and provided the key to unlocking secrets that had remained hidden for millennia. The research began with detailed analysis of how different species approached problem-solving. The Zenthari were shown a series of complex mathematical puzzles that required simultaneous calculation across multiple variables. Their four-armed coordination and parallel processing abilities allowed them to solve these problems with remarkable speed and accuracy. The Cathari were presented with quantum mechanical scenarios that would confuse most other species, but their innate understanding of probability fields made the solutions obvious to them. The Velterans could identify energy patterns in seemingly random data that completely escaped detection by conventional sensors. Each species excelled in their particular domain, often achieving results that seemed impossible to others. The Scion Collective could process emotional and mental patterns across vast networks of connected minds. The crystalline Hardani could analyze geological and structural information by simply touching stone or metal. Every civilization had evolved remarkable specializations that allowed them to master specific aspects of universal knowledge. When humans were given the same tests, their performance was mediocre across all categories. Lisa and the other human researchers could not match the Zenthari's mathematical speed, the Cathari's quantum intuition, or the Velterans' energy sensitivity. By every specialized measure, humans appeared to be inferior to their galactic neighbors. However, when the researchers began presenting problems that required combining multiple types of pattern recognition simultaneously, the results shifted dramatically. The breakthrough came when Dr. Vextal presented a complex scenario that involved mathematical sequences, quantum probability, energy flow patterns, and structural analysis all integrated into a single problem. The specialized species approached it by breaking it down into separate components that their particular abilities could handle. The Zenthari calculated the mathematical elements while the Cathari worked on the quantum aspects, and the Velterans analyzed the energy components. Each group produced excellent results in their specialty, but they struggled to combine their findings into a coherent solution. Lisa approached the same problem differently. Instead of breaking it into separate parts, she looked for relationships and connections between all the different elements at once. Her human brain tried to see the entire puzzle as a single integrated pattern rather than a collection of specialized problems. While her understanding of each individual component was less sophisticated than the specialist could achieve, her ability to perceive the overall structure allowed her to find solutions that the others missed. "Look at these symbols again," Lisa said as she stood before the void resonator. pointing to different sections of its surface patterns. The artifact had remained active since her first touch, its internal light pulsing gently as if waiting for something. Each of your species has been analyzing them through your particular lens of expertise. The Zenthari see mathematical sequences and calculate their properties. The Cathari detect quantum fluctuation patterns and map their probabilities. The Veltarans sense energy frequencies and measure their harmonics. She traced several of the interconnected patterns with her finger, and the artifact responded with subtle changes in brightness and tone. But what if the architects designed this as an integrated system that requires all these perspectives simultaneously? Humans might not be better at any single type of analysis, but we are uniquely capable of holding multiple pattern types in our minds at the same time and looking for connections between them. To test this theory, the research teams designed new experiments that required pattern recognition across multiple domains. They created puzzles that combined mathematical relationships with energy frequencies, quantum mechanics with structural engineering, and psychological patterns with physical laws. The results were consistent and startling. While specialized species could master individual aspects of these challenges, humans consistently performed better at finding solutions that required synthesizing information from different fields. The implications were staggering. The architect civilization had apparently created technology that could only be fully understood and operated by minds capable of broad pattern recognition rather than deep specialization. This explained why 3 centuries of focused expertise had failed to activate their devices. Each species had been applying their greatest strengths to problems that required a completely different approach. Dr. Kerlani, who had spent decades studying architect technology from a purely quantum mechanical perspective, found the revelation both exciting and humbling. We have been like musicians trying to understand a symphony by analyzing only the violin parts, she admitted during one of the research sessions. Each of us heard our own instruments perfectly, but none of us could perceive the full composition. The research teams began re-examining other architect artifacts scattered throughout the galaxy with this new understanding. Ancient devices that had been dismissed as broken or incomplete suddenly showed new possibilities when approached with human pattern recognition. Lisa worked with alien specialists to identify the multiple layers of information encoded in various artifacts, revealing that most architect technology operated on principles that required integrated thinking rather than specialized knowledge. The most significant discovery came when they realized that the Void Resonator was not just a single device but part of a vast network of connected artifacts. The patterns on its surface were actually a form of universal language that combined mathematical concepts, energy signatures, quantum states, and dimensional coordinates into a single integrated communication system. No wonder previous attempts to decode it had failed when each species could only understand fragments of the complete message. As understanding of architect principles grew, the relationship between humanity and the rest of galactic civilization began to shift. The species that had been considered primitive newcomers were suddenly recognized as possessing unique capabilities that were essential for unlocking the greatest archaeological treasures in the galaxy. Trade delegations arrived at Earth with offers of technology exchange and cultural partnerships. Research facilities throughout the galaxy requested human advisors to help with problems that had puzzled specialists for generations. Captain Morrison found himself negotiating agreements that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. Humanity was being invited to join research projects, exploration missions, and scientific ventures as equal partners rather than junior members of galactic society. The species whose lack of specialization had seemed like a weakness was now being courted for exactly that quality. But the most important discovery was yet to come. Deep analysis of the Void Resonator's network connections revealed something that changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about the architect civilization and their ultimate fate. The activation of the Void Resonator network opened doorways that the galaxy had never imagined possible. What began as a single glowing artifact in a museum became the key to an entire web of architect technology scattered across hundreds of star systems. Ancient construction sites that had been silent for millennia suddenly hummed to life when human researchers made contact with their control systems. Massive engineering projects that had been abandoned as failures revealed themselves to be incomplete rather than broken. Most importantly, a communication array buried deep in the core of an ancient space station began transmitting Signals across dimensional barriers that no one had known existed. Dr. Parker found herself at the center of discoveries that redefined galactic civilization's understanding of the universe itself. The communication array had taken 3 weeks to fully activate, requiring her to work with teams of specialists from every major species to decode its integrated pattern languages. When the first clear signal finally came through, the message was weak and distorted by countless eons of time and space, but unmistakably artificial in origin. The transmission arrived in fragments over several days, each piece requiring careful reconstruction by the combined efforts of human pattern recognition and alien technical expertise. The message spoke of a great catastrophe that had forced the architects to retreat from normal space-time into parallel dimensions where the laws of physics operated differently. They had not died or simply vanished as everyone had assumed. Instead, they had withdrawn to escape some cosmic disaster that threatened to destroy all life in the galaxy. The architects had left behind their technology as both a refuge and a test. Their devices could preserve entire civilizations by shifting them into protected dimensional spaces, but only species capable of true universal thinking could learn to operate the systems safely. For millions of years they had waited in their exile, hoping that evolution would eventually produce minds capable of the broad pattern recognition necessary to unlock their legacy. Captain Morrison stood in the rebuilt communication chamber as the latest transmission came through, watching Lisa work with alien scientists to decode messages from beings who had transcended normal reality. The irony was not lost on him that humanity's supposed weakness had become their greatest strength. For 300 years, everyone tried to force these locks with their greatest abilities, he observed to Dr. Vextal. It took human limitation to find the solution. The Xanthari curator had become one of humanity's strongest advocates among the galactic community. Her own research had been revolutionized by learning to see patterns as integrated wholes, rather than collections of separate parts. Your species has taught us something profound about intelligence itself, she replied. We spent so long perfecting our individual strengths that we forgot the value of seeing connections between different types of knowledge. News of contact with the architects spread throughout the galaxy, with effects that transformed entire civilizations overnight. The Galactic Council formally reorganized itself to include humanity as a founding member of the new Architect Research Consortium. Trade agreements and technology sharing programs expanded rapidly as other species realized that human pattern recognition could unlock secrets in their own ancient artifacts and abandoned research projects. Universities across the galaxy established exchange programs to send their brightest students to study human approaches to integrated thinking. Dr. Carolani, who had initially demanded that Lisa be studied like a laboratory specimen, became one of the most enthusiastic supporters of human-alien collaboration. Her own quantum research had advanced more in the past month than in the previous 40 years, simply by learning to consider how quantum effects connected to other physical phenomena rather than studying them in isolation. We have been thinking like specialists for so long that we forgot how to think like scientists, she admitted. During one of the research sessions, the practical applications of architect technology began to reshape galactic civilization in ways that no one had anticipated. Construction devices that could manipulate matter at the atomic level made resource scarcity obsolete virtually overnight. Transportation systems that folded space-time allowed instant travel between distant star systems. Medical equipment that operated on principles combining biology, quantum mechanics, and dimensional physics could cure diseases that had plagued species for millennia. But the most significant changes were not technological but social and philosophical. The discovery that broad thinking was more valuable than narrow expertise challenged fundamental assumptions about how advanced civilizations should develop. Educational systems throughout the galaxy began incorporating human-style integrated learning approaches alongside traditional specialized training. Research projects started including generalists as well as experts to ensure that important connections were not overlooked. The first successful dimensional portal opened 6 months after the initial contact, allowing direct communication with architect representatives rather than just receiving their transmitted messages. The beings who emerged from the dimensional rift looked nothing like any species in the galaxy, but their joy at finally making contact was unmistakable regardless of their alien appearance. We have waited so long for minds capable of seeing the universe as it truly is, the lead architect communicated, through patterns of light and sound that Lisa had learned to interpret. Your species may be young, but you possess the mental flexibility that took us millions of years to develop. You can bridge the gap between specialized knowledge and universal understanding. The architects explained that the cosmic catastrophe they had fled was still a threat. Though it would not reach the galaxy for several thousand years, their technology could protect entire star systems by shifting them into safe dimensional spaces. But the process required operators who could coordinate multiple types of pattern recognition simultaneously. Humanity's natural generalist thinking made them ideal candidates to learn these systems. As the first year of human-architect cooperation drew to a close, Dr. Parker often reflected on how dramatically everything had changed from that first day in the museum. The species that had been newcomers to galactic civilization were now essential partners in preparing for challenges that threatened the entire universe. Humanity's lack of specialization, which had seemed like a disadvantage, had become the key to unlocking humanity's role as bridge builders between different forms of knowledge. The Void Resonator still sat in its place of honor in the museum, but now it was surrounded by dozens of active architect devices that hummed with gentle energy. Visitors from across the galaxy came to see the artifact that had changed everything, but more importantly, they came to study human approaches to pattern recognition that might help their own species develop more integrated thinking abilities. Dr. Vextel had expanded the museum into a center for universal learning where specialists from different fields worked together with human generalists to solve problems that had seemed impossible. The building that had once housed only relics of dead civilizations had become a laboratory for creating a living future that combined the best aspects of all galactic cultures. The conversation with the architects had only just begun, but already it was clear that the galaxy would never be the same.